but he said, you're the only person that sat me down in your office, talked to me about transitioning out of the military, introduced me to people in the private sector, and nobody else did that. And I always wanted to thank you. And I said, great, how's it going? And he said, it's going great, but I heard you wrote a book. And I said, yeah, it's coming out in a few months. And he said, well, can I give it to a friend of mine? And I said, yeah, I'll send you a galley copy, which is like a rough draft. Who is it? And he said, Chris Pratt. So I said, yeah, that'd be great, because I thought of Chris Pratt playing this role as I was writing it over the last few years. And he gave it to Chris. Chris read it and called the next week and wanted to option it. So now all of us are executive producers on the show. So that's how that came about.
Which will lend extra authenticity to it. Actually, the wonderful part about it, there are a lot of guys writing military thrillers, some of which have had actual experience, such as Jack, and some of which have worked really hard, like Mark Rainey, to acquire it. But Jack is the real deal. But what we haven't mentioned his mother, the librarian, because she has a significant role in the reason that Jack is a novelist.
That's right. So I just grew up surrounded by books. Our house looked a lot like this, just surrounded by books, and grew up with this love of reading. And so from a very early age, I just knew that was something that I would do. But on the military side, they all kind of blend together in that I knew I was going to join the military just because everything was in my blood. And then, hey, title of the book. So it was just part of me. It was just innate. And then my grandfather, he was a Marine aviator in World War II. He was killed off Okinawa, 1945. So I grew up with his medals and his Marine Corps aviation wings and the silk maps that they gave aviators back then. Because if you had a paper map, it would disintegrate in the water. But silk maps obviously just get wet. You can still use them. So I had all that, and I still have all that today. But then I found out what SEALs were. So I was already on that military path, but then found out what SEALs were at the ripe old age of 7. And my mom took me to the library, and we did research into what SEALs were. And there was a little bit written back then, not too much. You could actually read it all in a day. And then that's how I made that transition from studying what I found in the library to then reading those thrillers I mentioned earlier. Because back in those days, the protagonist usually had Vietnam experience as either a Marine sniper, as a Navy SEAL, as an Army Special Forces guy, or a CIA paramilitary. But that was the background the protagonist, the main characters had, and I wanted that background in real life. So I was just drawn in. So I credit my mom at every chance I get with giving me that love of reading, and then my dad encouraged that as well. It was just a natural thing, just like sitting down to dinner, reading. It was just a natural part of growing up.
So when we sat down to dinner last night, which my husband cooked, Jack looked at my library and was overcome with library envy.
It was great.
So,
it was a beautiful one.
I could see him,
yep,
taking surreptitious pictures. And he's going to transform your podcast studio into a library?
Yeah, that's because they're building a second podcast studio outside that's separate and a lot bigger. And then, so the current one will turn into the library. And then I have another place to write now. But even with all those places in the house, for those who have children, even though you have these separate areas, it's like you close the doors and it's like a magnet. I have this big like on-air sign that I can click for the podcast, and it's like that's when the dog comes and starts scratching at the door. The kids are like banging on to ask me a question. They don't want to talk to me any other time. They're thoroughly unimpressed by all of this. But as soon as those doors close. So for this last book, I went and started renting Airbnbs around Park City and found a really nice little log cabin that was just super small, so it was very efficient to go from the kitchen to the wood-burning stove to a couch to the table and just chop wood outside, throw it in that stove, and just write away without interruption for a while. So
don't you love this image, Jack the itinerant writer?
I love it.
Renting Airbnbs in Park City, Utah.
Yeah,
you're right as fuck. It's a whole new view of Jack, right? So James Reece, why is he called James Reece?
That is still top secret.
Someday
I shall reveal. But yeah, so there's a military side and a personal side that kind of come together to make that name. And what I didn't realize, because it was both being personal, even the military one, that JR, so James Reece, there is a John Rambo, there is a Jack Reacher, there is a Jack Ryan, and I had no idea. Someone pointed that out to me like in the first year of being on social media, and they pointed that out and asked if it was intentional, and it was totally not because of where the names come from. But I'll take it. You know, that's good lineage right there.
So one of the things that Jack has done, which I particularly love, because David Morrell has been a dear friend of the store and of me for many, many years, is that Jack has done a podcast for the 50th anniversary of Rambo.
That's right.
Or actually, First Blood.
Yeah.
Not Rambo the movie, but the novel from which it springs, right?
It came out in 1972, in May of 1972, so about a week away from its initial publication, and it's never been out of print for the last 50 years. So yeah, he wasn't called John Rambo back then. He was just Rambo for the fans who have read the book. And the book and the film are both fantastic, but they're both very different. And David Morrell, of course, is a genius and one of my literary heroes, and now he's a dear friend. And yeah, I think we did the definitive podcast interview on First Blood. So it's about, I think we did about 5 hours, and it'll get whittled down to, we had to take some breaks, and he went to get some props. He went to grab knives and all sorts of stuff and bows during the interview. So I think it's about 4 hours long, but it was such an honor for me to do that.
That's so great. Jack was also a big fan of Clive Cussler, and I was able to get Jack down from Park City to go to Clive's last event.
That's right.
Yeah, it was. It was really very meaningful, and Dirk was there, but also Stephen Hunter. You and Mark Graney and I and Stephen did a really wonderful program here. So isn't it great to meet your heroes?
I love being here. I'll come down anytime you ask.
No. That wasn't my point. You got to meet your heroes. Here was incidental.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And that we got to compare our Doxa dive watches, me and Clive and Dirk. We got to compare our Doxa dive watches that night and had a great time. And then he passed away not long after. So.
Well, you can tell that Jack is used to community because he's really wonderful supporting other authors. And I love the fact that this whole group of guys who write in this field, anyway, kind of coalesce. Yeah. And you're a real spark plug for that.
Well, appreciate that. But I didn't think it was going to be like that. I thought in the military, like going into the private sector, no matter what it was, I thought people would kind of keep you at arm's length. And the exact opposite was my experience.
So people asked me when I first met Jack, I said, how was he? And I said, a little scary because he could just like kill you with one finger.
In my youth. I don't know.
Right. So let's talk about In the Blood, which is the 5th James Reece book. Right. It starts out in Montana, and James is off the grid.
Yeah. So he's like, I think this character has resonated for a couple reasons. One being that even though they're completely fictional narratives, the emotions and the feelings behind the things that happen come from things that I experienced downrange. So if James Reece gets ambushed in Los Angeles, California, I just think back what it was like in Baghdad 2006 to actually get ambushed, and then I take those feelings and emotions and apply them to a completely fictional narrative. So I think that's one thing that made it stand out to Simon & Schuster and then to readers. But then the other side is that he's on a journey. He's not the same person that's just picked up and then dropped in a semi-similar scenario for each book going forward. And he's on a journey like all of us are. So we're all asking questions. We're all evolving, hopefully. We're all adapting. We're all applying successes and failures and the lessons of those to the future as wisdom, hopefully. And he's the same way. So he's on this journey, even though I'm going to age him slowly, but he's still on a journey, and we're all on a journey. So I think that him being on that journey really resonates with people as well. So then he's, when we meet him in this one, he's in Montana and figuring out his next moves in life. And he's with Katie hanging out there with the Hastings family. And then they see something on the news, plane is shot down in Africa, and it draws him back into another conspiracy. So, which is tied to what's happened in the last few books. So this is a sniper-centric novel of violent resolutions. That's how I had it in my head as I was writing it. But then as I really got into it, something else came up as a theme, and that was forgiveness, which is very odd for me because I didn't start it with that in mind, and especially what I write about, and maybe I'm getting soft in my old age. But the forgiveness part really came in because it's so important in life in general. And like I said, he's on that journey. So he's talking about my favorite chapter I ever wrote. It's in the book. It's chapter 3, and it's just him talking to Caroline Hastings, who's the matriarch of the Hastings family, and it's just them having a conversation. And I think that's my favorite chapter that I've ever written to date. But there's a forgiveness theme that starts there, and then it carries on throughout. But don't worry, there's still a lot of people that get their heads chopped off and put on stakes and stuff like that. So don't worry, this will not be part of Oprah's book club anytime soon. So
no, it's really not.
I just added that forgiveness stuff out of the.
And the opening chapter, I have to say, I read it in my advanced reading copy as I was flying to San Francisco in order to fly to Tahiti, and it really gave me second thoughts about whether I wanted to be doing this, because, in fact, we have this plane, this Israeli woman, who we learn is an assassin, and she's been in Africa. Where's she? In Burkina
Faso, doing a little work for the state of Israel.
She was doing a little work, and now she's going home, and she's thinking her husband has died, and she has 2 children, and she's thinking she's going to hang it up, and she's going to give up her professional career as an assassin and settle down, spend more time with her family and the whole bit. Meantime, you see, this the first 2 pages of this book, so I'm not reading it. You see people congregating along the side of the airport, and it looks like there might be a missile Looks
Yeah.
like there's a Jeep and some bad guys.
That's it.
And
That's how it starts.
when you start, I mean, I really seriously thought about getting off the plane.
It's too late at that point, Barbara. You
I
can't.
know. But anyway, I think Jack really starts this off with a literal bang. But then you know, one thing you do for those of you who really are into weapons, you kind of digress for a little bit into serious weaponry before we really get into the story. Now, did you do that? I know. Did you do that to kind of play to your audience, or just because it's a question that consumes you?
It would be very odd for me not to do that. I just, it's just me. So very odd for me just to just have someone carry a gun or pick up a shotgun. I can't do it. It has to be a certain type. It has to tell a story about the area, the person who's picking it up maybe, because every time I see somebody, see what they're carrying, their hat, their shoes, pants, they're carrying a cocked and locked 1911 in a leather holster, leather belt, or they're carrying a striker fire pistol in a Kydex, appendix carry, you know, what kind of hat are they wearing? Like, all those things tell a story. So I use those same things in the book to tell stories as well. So it was very odd for me not to do that. I can't help it. So.
Well, I wasn't asking you to apologize. I was just, I thought, you know, my eyes tend to glaze over because it's not my thing, so I just kind of move on. But for those of you who are really into it, I think it's terrific to, again, it adds authenticity to what Jack writes because he clearly knows what he's talking about. One thing I've learned from hosting so many of these events with these guys is if you get one thing wrong with a gun, that's it for your reader.
Yeah.
I mean, they are never going to forgive you.
Yeah, like if you did it in 1980, like who are you supposed to let know that someone, you know, a safety flipped off on a Glock? Like, what are you going to sit down and type a letter out and to who? And then and where are you going to mail it? And then if you did send it to the publisher or manage to find the author's address, it would have to get through an assistant and get up there and actually be opened and not thrown away immediately. But today, all of those crazy letters can just show up in Amazon reviews. And that's just how it is, you know.
Unless they're complaining about the shipping charge and give you a 1-star review for that very purpose, right? Anyway, because she's under a name in French, she has a fake identity because of her mission and so forth. But facial recognition software comes into play here because it's easy to figure out when they look at the passenger manifest that is it Clotilde? Is that her name? It's close.
Yeah, it's close. It's French. So a lot of times when you do names in books, you don't say them out loud. Even the terminal list, I didn't say it out loud until it was published. And then the 2 L's together, I was like, oh, wow. I mean, I love the title, but I never thought it was an issue until afterwards. So a lot of the names, I don't even know how to pronounce them, especially a lot of the foreign names, because I don't look it up. That's Ray Porter's job. He has to go and, as the narrator, figure out how to say all these things. But I can just look them up and put them in. I don't have to sound them out. Yeah, Malene Cotard,
I hear you. Right. Patrick and I have learned the hard way that it's always a good idea before we go on camera to ask the author how to pronounce his name because we've really messed it up a couple of times.
It's a real thing.
But anyway, she has a French name on the manifest list, but facial recognition software allows James to figure out that
he recognizes her. Yeah.
This is all the very beginning of the book. She touched his life in a very meaningful way a while back. What was that all about?
Yeah, so I think I get to that in chapter 4 or 5. But if you read any of the previous novels, you know that I was working for the CIA for a little bit while I was still in the military. But it was a very impactful time because it was Baghdad. It was 2006, so the IED threat was high, and I was the only military attached to this specific unit, so we got to go out. I didn't have the normal red tape and bureaucracy attached to some of the military operations that we were doing at the time. And so I got to take that time and that place, and there was a bar that we went to on the CIA compound. I guess it's okay to say that now since we're a little bit removed from that time. But there was a bar we went to, and it really helped foster a lot of the personal relationships between people who would go out in the field and then those that were supporting them from the tactical operations side of the house with air assets or other units out there as quick reaction forces. But it was just a really special time during my time in uniform. So that shows up in there in that particular chapter. And of course, I fictionalize it from there, even though there were a lot of suicide bombings and a lot of VBIEDs. They usually happened at the gates. So that's why I have so much respect for those typically Marines and Army that were standing at the gate of all these bases, daylight, seeing cars come up that were just, you can't tell, is it a family inside, or is it just bad shocks, or is it packed with some sort of a improvised explosive device? So I bring that into play as well, and bring the vehicle a little closer to this bar that we all went to on the CIA compound and have it detonate, and then kind of brings them together.
Well, it's really a very touching personal scene. And so James recognizes her, and off he goes from his isolation in Montana, off the grid, off he goes to Washington. And I suppose the alert reader has to say, was she assassinated because of who she was? Or is there another reason that they've killed her? I'm going to leave it right there because you guys want to read the book. You don't want to know any more than that, right?
That's it.
Well,
that's it. Good job, Barbara. Nice. Setting that hook.
I did. I'm not even going to mention the end, but
No.
I promise you're going to be back here for book 6. Just absolutely. So you know, how does it work for you? You know, you start out with a scenario. Does the book sort of grow organically, or are you one of these outline people where you kind of know where it's going, even if it digresses along the way?
Yeah, I'm an outline person. I like to know where I'm going. So typically I take, and it's been this way, I don't know if it'll always be this way, but it's been this way for every book, to include number 6, the one I'm doing now, in that I start with a one-page executive summary, kind of like what you read on the flap of a book. And that question there to me is, hey, do I want to spend, I got this from David Morrell, he would write himself a letter, and he'd look at that letter and say, do I want to spend the next year, 2 years of my life on this project? And for me, it's that one-page executive summary. Do I want to spend a year involved in this project, devoting myself to this story? And if that answer is yes, then I say, okay, great. If someone was to read this one-page executive summary, would they want to then read it? And if that answer is yes, then I'm off to the races. So I do that, and then I turn that one-page executive summary, and I have a theme also right at the beginning and a title right at the beginning, because I don't want to be typing away and thinking, oh, I hope I can come up with a good title. I don't want to waste any bandwidth on anything other than the story. I want everything to go into that story. So I turn that into an outline. And I typically know where I'm going. I know typically how I'm going to get there, and I outline it as best I can. But if I run into a block, like whether it's in part 1, 2, it doesn't matter where it is, but if I run into it, I don't spend the next week thinking, oh, how's he going to get out of this? What am I going to do? No, I just keep going. I just leave it blank, put some X's in there, and just go over, through, around, and then I know that I have a year to figure it out. And it's not like I'm on the battlefield and bullets are flying and I have to make a decision right now and people's lives are depending on me. Nope, I can sleep on it. And then I can come back the next day. I can come back a week later. And then I can come back when I edit 6 or 7 months from now. So I know I'll figure it out as I do research and as the characters get to know each other and I propel the plot forward. So I don't let the outline slow me down. And
so there are
turn
two
that into
things.
the book.
Oh, sorry. There are 2 things that really make a thriller work. One is, quote, the instigating incident. What is it that kicks the whole thing off? Is it dramatic enough? You know, is it going to sustain whatever follows? But the other thing to make a really great thriller is you have to have a really great villain. Think about Silence of the Lambs. How many of you really care about Clarice Starling? No, it's Hannibal Lecter, right? That is the whole thing. So coming up with a great villain, is that hard for you, or is it just kind of, you met so many of them, you just plug them in?
Well, our senior level, I guess, politicians, and they give me a lot to work with these days. So these things I mean, it's true. Those characters kind of write themselves. But you know, I do try to humanize them as best I can, because that's just more fun than writing someone that's just, you know, single dimensional, and it's fun to kind of explore. Maybe take a few people that are out there in the public sphere, and you combine them together, and then take some of the worst elements of people you've met over the years and put that in there too. But then maybe humanize them a little bit, maybe give them a family or something like that to humanize them and give them a touch point so they're not totally unbelievable. But really, I mean, there's so much out there in the public space right now that I have to work with. I don't think I'll have a hard time coming up with villains in the future, and it's very therapeutic to write these characters, because usually, they get I don't know, they get blown up or they get stabbed in the eye or something happens that makes me feel good. I can't do this stuff in real life, so they throw me in jail, so I get to do it in the pages of a thriller.
You know, I mean, we were talking the other night after an event, the author and another person and I went out, and we sat there saying, you know, we're perfectly normal people. We're not actually Navy SEALs or whatever it is. And we're thinking assassination. We are thinking this is the only way we're going to resolve some of this.
Barbara, they're listening to you right now.
I'm kidding.
Just joking.
I'm not kidding. I really am. And I think, you know, what is the world, what state are we in when people who are not, you know, in the military and so forth are beginning to wonder if we can resolve anything?
Yeah, I mean, there's only a certain time, this very slim portion of human history where you haven't had to be good at that sort of thing to survive. where you haven't had to be good at the fighting, where you could outsource that to 911, or haven't been able to, or haven't had to be good at putting food on the table and going out hunting. Usually the same weapons are used both in hunting and defense of tribe and family and self. So this is just a blink in human history right here. But for most of it, we've all have ancestors that were good at those two things. Otherwise, we would not be here today. And society's fragile. We saw a little bit of that in 2020, a little bit of that from COVID and some civil unrest, and obviously we're seeing it in Ukraine and other places around the world. But for those who have traveled or been to Iraq and Afghanistan and some of these other places, society's a fragile place. So it's always good to be prepared. So.
There's the message of this event, right? Go home and be prepared. So in order, I mean, you have a choice when you've got a hero like James Reece. Is he going to have like a main squeeze, or is he going to be like Jack Reacher, you know, drop into the town, romance the girl? And he doesn't always do that, actually. So what kind of choices have you made for James?
Yeah, well, he's working that out. That's part of the journey side right there. So he and Katie are figuring out their relationship, and that's fun to work on. I love writing their dialogue, because I really get to know the characters through the dialogue. When I write them in the beginning, if it's a new character, it's just a name and a position, like so-and-so, President of the United States, so-and-so, Secret Service agent. But I don't know much about them yet. And then as I write and I have them interact with these other characters, that's where they really come alive. And that's where I start to figure out their backgrounds. I don't even have a background on them usually at the beginning, maybe just a shell of something. But as I write them and realize what they need to do to propel that plot forward, that's where I really get to know them. And I love writing the dialogue, because then I get to know the characters better. And I love writing Katie and Reece, just having dinner together, having wine together, getting to know each other. I don't know, for whatever reason, that's a lot of fun for me, and a lot of fun for the readers too, because I get this question a lot about what's gonna happen. Are they gonna get married? What's gonna happen? And don't know yet. We'll see.
It's hard to say. You know, if any of you Brad Thor fans, if you are, the Norwegian ninja has entered his life, right? 2 books in. We're going to be talking to Brad on July 5th, right here, but I find it interesting that he actually detonated a woman earlier. Remember that Scott was it? So, you know, you have to ask yourself, if you've got a real world-traveling action hero, can they really have a personal life?
We'll see.
Well,
see. I'm working on it.
I know. Or it may or may not.
Yeah, I haven't figured that part out yet.
So before we go to questions, one last thing. You and I talked about this at some length last night, the difference between being a novelist and a screenwriter, because you are actually engaged, or have been, in writing the terminal list for Amazon. How's it working for you? Is it like a whole different side of your brain? Are you having fun with it?
I've had a great time with it, because I've been like a sponge. I've been learning. And I had a great showrunner, David DiGilio, Chris Pratt, and Antoine Fuqua. Picked him right out of the gate. So in December of 2019, we had our first call, and we've talked every day since, to include today. And he's just amazing. And he was a little worried, because usually they get rid of the author right away, because they don't want the author there saying, "You ruined my vision," you know, on set. And so right off the bat, I got to talk to him about my love of reading, and noting the differences between things I'd read and what's happened in film when they were adapted and all this. So we've just been kind of connected since December of 2019, writing that pilot. And by writing it, I mean he wrote it, and I was just learning, and I was just he was just teaching me the ropes, and I was just a sponge, and I was advising on it and all that. But then he took it with Chris and Antoine, and they shopped it around to Amazon and to Netflix and to Showtime and HBO and Apple and Hulu. And then it got in a bidding war, and Amazon ended up with it. And then they put the writer's room together. So now you have about, in this case, I think it was 12 people that are now taking your book and then adapting it to the screen. And for me, I got to advise on all of those. And then knowing that once they were done, those writers would go off elsewhere, and then it would go back to just me and Chris and Antoine and one other writer, Max Adams, who's also a former Army Ranger. And then we get to morph them from there. And so even when you get all those things signed off and it's all done and you think it looks great, it's like, for those of you who've been in the military, it's like making a plan in a nice air-conditioned space, and then you get out there on the ground, and it's a lot different than what you imagined back here in the Tactical Operations Center. So very similar with scripts. You get out there and you're looking at it, and you're looking at the area that you're in, and then you got to adapt. And then also the actors bring something. So Chris brings something, and Taylor brought something, Taylor Kitsch, and like all these people brought things. Gene Triplehorn brought something, and they make the character their own, but that impacts in a series, episode 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So you have to adapt the scripts on the fly as you're going, and that was a continual process the whole time, all the way through.
Didn't you tell me that there was something, some scene or other that they were doing, and you told them it wasn't really authentic, and they listened to you? Let me tell you what, that is truly rare, because the writer is like the least important person ever on a movie set, if they're even allowed on the movie set. So how did you get them to pay attention to you?
It was just trust. It was just handing that to Chris and Antoine Fuqua, and then getting to know each other over the last few years, and we just had this trust and this bond. And also I had Jared Shaw, so he's the guy that gave Chris the book. I was in the SEAL teams with, and so he was there every day on set. Max Adams, the Ranger I mentioned, he was there every day. Ray Mendoza, he does a SEAL with me, and he has a company called War Office Productions, and they do the technical advising. So I had those three guys all day, every day on set, working with the actors on weapons manipulation and tactics and all the rest of it. So, and they did such a great job. So then when I show up, then they also listen, because they just think that I'm in there with that crew. And we also had a ton of SEALs just as actors, playing SEALs in the show. So it was like a reunion when I showed up there. The COVID police on set, they lost their minds. So, because it was like, hey, what's up, buddy? I didn't see you since Iraq, and all this, and it was great. We had such a good time making this thing. Yeah, we'll see. Hopefully there'll be a season 2. We shall see.
Did they give you a director's chair?
I do, yes. I got a director's chair. Yeah, it's in my office. And what was really cool about that experience is that, one, it was like a military operation. So I walked on set the first time, and the Kraft Food Services is there. And that's like, the logistics train has to feed the Army. And then you had an explosives guy on set. In a SEAL platoon, we have the breacher. We had an armorer on set. Just like in a SEAL platoon, they're checking out the weapons, checking them back in, checking the serial numbers, keeping that inventory. And then you have Antoine Fuqua at the top. He's like the commanding officer, setting the tone for everything. And then you have Chris down here, and he's at the tactical level, and he's really setting the tone down here. And I had so many people come up to me on set and say, hey, we've been involved in hundreds of these, and nothing has felt like this before. There's something different about this set. And that's all due to Chris and Antoine setting that tone up here at that level. So yeah, the whole thing was just fantastic. Yeah.
I'm so glad that you've enjoyed it. I can't wait to see it. I hope you all are excited about it too. Why don't we take questions? We've got about 15 minutes worth of questions, and we can go back to the signing line.
All right.
So why don't you call the questions?
Yes, sir. And for question-wise, and signing, I have to get to the airport in a little bit. So I wish I'd stay all night if I possibly could, and just make sure
next
that we
time,
all
trust
got
me,
to hang out
you will.
and sign everything. But yeah, I got to get to this next flight. So I apologize in advance if I don't get to a book or anything. And I really do sincerely appreciate everybody being here. But question, yes.
Hey, Jack. So when you did what you did, the individual is way down here. It's all team, right? You never think of yourself. So how did you transition or accept becoming famous when so many people now are pushing fame, money, and all this stuff at you? And your instinct is a team guy.
Yeah, so the question was about coming from a team environment to a more individual type of a thing. It's still a team to me. I have Emily Bessler at Simon & Schuster. She is fantastic. She's my editor-publisher out there. David Brown, my publicist, amazing. Ironclad does anything technical in my life. So they produce the podcast and do all that sort of a thing. I outsourced the merch stuff this year, so that's a team over there that another buddy, former Special Forces guy, has a company that does that for me now. So it's still a team, and really, nothing's changed for me. I'm always busy. Even in the SEAL teams, I was always just focused on being the best operator and best leader I could be. And now I'm just focused on being the best author that I can possibly be, and making each chapter better than the next, each book better than the next. I want to move the genre forward, even if it's just by a tiny sliver each time, but then also make the books the best they have them get better every time, because you're trusting me with time you're never going to get back. Being here, following me on Instagram, reading the book, listening to Ray Porter narrate it, that's something I take so seriously, because we only have so much, and I'm not going to waste yours. So all of me has to go in this. She's fantastic, but I think she's spoken for. Yeah, Gene Triplehorn, she's amazing. We had such great conversations. I just love her. Could not say, can't say enough great things about her.
So I have a question, just a second, from the video audience. Carl Wallace from Australia. Thank you very much for watching, Carl. What other countries are you going to have James visit? Because he's been in some really cool places.
Yes.
And some not very cool places.
Yes. So for the first book, I was still in the military. So I'd been to Iraq, I'd been to Afghanistan, I'd been to most everywhere that I write about in that one. The second one, I'd been to Ukraine already, I'd been to Morocco already. I hadn't been to Mozambique, so I got on a flight right after I retired from the military, well, a month or two later, and flew to Mozambique because I knew that even though I hadn't even submitted the first book to Emily at Simon & Schuster, and I always knew I was going to write at least two because there's the story of John Grisham writing A Time to Kill, and he could not give that first book away. And then he wrote The Firm. And now we have a John Grisham novel every year since. So I was always going to write the two, even if the first one didn't take off. But I love going to these different places and putting boots on the ground because you get so much more than you would if you just go online. And also the questions that I wrote out before I went to Mozambique, I got on the ground and I asked all those questions of my trackers and professional hunters and people that I met over there. But then I got so much more than I'd written out ahead of time as questions. So I did that. Then the third one, I went to just south of Siberia to Kamchatka Peninsula, Russia. Because it plays such an important part in the story. So I knew I had to go over there and put boots on the ground, and that was an incredible experience as well. And then the fourth one, COVID hit. So everything was locked down, and luckily I'd been to most of the places that I write about in that one. And then for this one, I really wanted to go to Israel. There's a significant portion of the book that takes place in Israel, and I have a lot of friends over there, and it was impossible to get in. It was open for like a day and then it was shut down. And then you had to be an Israeli citizen and it was chaos trying to get in there. So that didn't happen, but I did send it to my friend over there and he gave it to his whole family. So 3 generations in Israel read the Israel portion and they said they couldn't believe that I didn't go there to do research. And so that made me feel pretty good. So I'll have to keep Israel in a book because I really want to go there. I haven't been. We have an exchange program in the SEAL teams and I was always in Iraq or Afghanistan, so I never got to do it. But I would have loved to have gone over there and see what they call Flotilla 13. That's their version of the SEALs. But Israel will have to come back in another book just so I can go and do some research and use it as an excuse. But he's going to go all over the world. I mean, I love traveling and I love writing about these different places.
New Zealand.
So
we're going to talk about New Zealand.
I did. I went to New Zealand. I've been there a couple times, and I've been thinking about how to incorporate that in, especially with a couple of the places that I went to. So we shall see.
And for you, Gerald, Australia. All right, another question from the audience.
Yes.
In the terminal list, a lot of people kind of compare Lorraine Hartley to Hillary Clinton.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I get a lot more Nancy Pelosi out of it.
Oh well, yeah. There may be a little of that.
Where your inspiration came
Yes,
from.
yes. All characters in all my novels have no bearing or relation to anyone living or dead. I think that's it. Yeah, buddy, what's up? Front row.
How do you compete things without doing them right?
Say that one more time.
How do you do things without doing them wrong?
How do I do things without doing them wrong? That is a really good question. You just do the best I can, just like everybody else. We're all doing the best we can and try to root every action in a foundation. That means like seeing to your character, and then really everything else takes care of itself from then on. So I think that's just how, just doing the best I can, just like everybody, just like you, I know.
You can't
Awesome,
see
man.
him, but this is from a first grader here in the front row, and this is his very first book event ever.
Yeah.
Isn't that a great question
So
from
cool.
him?
Great question, buddy. Thank you. Thank you for asking that question. I appreciate it. And maybe don't read the books for another couple of years. So it's all right. Listen to them, maybe.
Right.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. All right. Question. Yes, sir.
Are you planning any generational books like Stephen Hunter, his dad, or his grandfather?
Yep. So Stephen Hunter's the reason that I kind of put these things in there, being such a fan of all his books. And now he's a friend, dear friend. Just can't say enough great things about him and his work. But I did that on purpose because I think of all the books that I read throughout my entire life, that those books do such a good job of just planting things here and there, and that let him go back and explore later. But I asked him this question when we were here, actually. I'd asked him before, and I knew the answer, but I wanted to ask him in front of people about some John F. Kennedy assassination things that were in Point of Impact. And he said he had a whole other storyline that was going on with that, and editor wanted it out, or he wanted it out. And so he took it all out, but there wasn't a word search back then, and when he wrote that one, so he missed a few. And then he got to explore that later in the third bullet, and sprinkle them into other novels along the way. So I took from him, and in really enjoying that there were these little things that were dropped in that I was hoping maybe he'd explore later. Then I dropped things in my novels as well. I dropped some Iran-Contra stuff in there. I dropped some generational stuff from World War II and Vietnam and the Cold War. So I do drop things in there, and will I get back to them? I don't know. Maybe probably not all of them, but there'll be a few that I get back to somehow in the future. Yeah.
If you go to our Facebook or YouTube videos on our website, you will find Jack and I did the launch for Stephen Hunter's book. Was it February?
It was, yeah.
I think it was February. You can scroll down anyway. And then there's somewhere in there, if you keep going, you can see Jack and Mark and Stephen, because those things live forever.
They do live forever.
On our website, so you can find them.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. All right.
There's a question over here.
Yes.
Kind of twofold. One, are you going to make a cameo, or did you make a cameo?
The question was, did I make a cameo in the series? And you'll have to keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah. And then the other one that's probably a little more is with the incident that happened on the Baldwin set. Did they make any changes as far as there was a lot of talk that movie sets and everybody was going to have to change a lot?
Yeah, so the question was about the shooting on the Alec Baldwin set, and so we'd already wrapped by then, so we were already done. We finished in August, but I got to observe all that, and obviously I'm very interested in it. And the armorer was right there each and every day, right next to Chris. And so when they hand Chris a weapon, there's somebody over here, maybe doing the hair and makeup stuff and putting blood on his face, and the armorer is just sitting there waiting, and it does not show Chris the condition of that weapon until until he has Chris's undivided attention. So the director's saying something, someone's saying something over here, Chris is getting ready to do this next scene, but he's not showing him while he has his attention over here. He waits, and then they get that eye contact, and he shows them and say, hey, clear and safe, here's the magazine, nothing in it, or hey, here's the type of blank that's in there, because there's different kinds depending on how far you are from other actors and what you're doing. And explains to Chris exactly what that is, and just have that eye contact, and then boom, and off we go. So it was, about as safe as you could get. And then Chris knows what he's doing with firearms as well, so that's helpful. And then you're surrounded by SEALs also, so it was pretty safe. But I don't know if there's going to be any change. I don't know what the changes are that are going to come down from that. Yeah, hopefully there's another series, and but yeah, it was super safe. There's the scariest parts are people like falling off high places, and people that are the stuntmen that have these cables on them, and an explosion goes off like in a confined area, and then they get pulled and slammed into a wall, and you're like, sheesh. Because we think that it's all green screen, and they threw some green screen stuff in there, but not all. And then they throw someone into like a wall or rock, and it's like a real wall. It's not, it's not just pads. It was pretty wild to see how they did all that. And those stuntmen, they have, my hat's off to them. They were fantastic.
How about one more question?
One more question, Marcus, Gavin. We have two more questions. I can't not ask Gavin.
It might be an unfair one.
Okay.
So when they put Constant Wu as Katie.
Yeah.
And so you get a season 2, season 3, and the background of Katie is what it is. Did you have to make changes in her background as a result of that?
Yeah. So it's not really talked about that much in the series because it's visual, and so you can't just write a whole history. But in talking to the showrunner, there is a new background that's similar, but coming from a different place. So that's just, yeah.
So it's still tying to his father and all that kind of stuff?
It was, but it's not, because it's not already in the first one now, because it didn't really pertain to how this story plays out visually. So it'll be interesting to figure out and maybe it doesn't even show up in the second one. I'm not sure. I'm outlining the second one right now, and interestingly enough, on the second one, so True Believer, I have to figure out this Ukraine-Russia thing, because it actually happened. So, got to take some, got to figure that out. So, awesome. Yeah, but one more, yeah.
So, no disrespect to other characters that have been in this genre, but I feel like James Reece has definitely been breathing life back into this genre.
Oh.
What do you think it is about that character that people that may not be drawn to this genre before love about him, and just they love the stories and the books and I even get text messages saying, "Oh, I'm buying a gun."
Yeah, I get that a lot. People, I'm spending people's money. So say one more time. Say what is about him? Yeah. So what is it about James Reece that's his breathing life back into the genre? And man, I sincerely appreciate you saying that. It means a ton to me. But I think it's really that all of this comes from a real place. It's not. Yes, it's fiction, but there's so much of it that's it's like so much of me goes into it, and so much of the things I experienced went into it. Like I don't have to go track down a sniper from Ramadi in 2006 and then ask him questions about what it was like to do that job, and then filter it through whatever preconceived notions or biases I have, other books I've read, movies I've read, and then apply it to a fictional narrative. There's not all those steps to have it go through. It just comes directly from me remembering what it was like to go drop off the wall, not even go through a gate, and then go into the city at night and do that job. And I don't have to interview anybody about it. I'll call friends and be like, hey, what did we use back then? What was the grain of that bullet that we had? Like that sort of a thing. I'll just check a lot of things like that, but I can take the emotions and the feeling and apply them directly to that fictional narrative. So I think that's a big piece of it. I don't know.
That word authentic that we've been using probably applies. Before we wrap this up, we give away books to people who come. We have advanced reading copies here, and an actual book, and we do it by numbers. So you guys have got numbers in your books. Larry, how many did we give out? Can you tell me? Sorry? Do you, maybe there aren't any. Oh, rats. Well, that's normally how we do it. All right. All right, so you want to give a book to people who ask questions?
Yeah, everybody who asks, I'm going to give one to this guy here, this little guy in the front. What's a good one? Oh, I like this.
I don't know
the weapons that transformed America? That's it. That's for you, buddy. That's for you. There you go. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
There's Invisible Storm, a soldier's memoir of politics and PTSD.
Oh, my goodness. I don't know. This sounds like a Marcus book. Yeah, that sounds a few, buddy. Yeah, man.
Okay. This one is absolutely fabulous. This has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but this is about a woman who actually climbed one of the great mountains in the Himalayas, and she has written a thriller where a serial killer is cloaked as a mountain climber, and the whole thing takes place up in the mountain, and she is brilliant about what it takes to be a climber, what it's like to go to base camp. The whole thing is a really fabulous book.
Well, I know who this
no
goes
idea
to.
who to give it to.
I do.
All right.
Thank you for being at every single one of my events here. I appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. And now we have Red Burning Sky. Summer
awesome.
1944. Yugoslavia is locked in a war within a war. In addition to battling the German occupations, they're massacring each other, blah, blah, and there are 3 failed air missions behind Lieutenant Drew Carlton, who's desperate for redemption.
I like it. I like that. I know this is going to Gavin right here. Awesome, buddy.
Okay.
Thank you.
And this one is a real book. Trusted CIA operative Tom DeLonge is kidnapped in Dammam by Iranian operatives following a meeting with the Saudi ambassador and is tortured for coveted information, called Surviving the Lion's Den.
I like it. I like it. Awesome. Thanks for the sign. I appreciate it, man. Yeah, no, thank you guys for being here. Awesome.
So normally, as I say, we have a number in the book and we do it as a lottery, but what the hell. Anyway, thank you all very much. I want to thank our video audience for watching. I'm going to ask those of you who have had your books signed if you guys would just peacefully depart. No shooting on the way out.
Good tip. Good tip. Thank you guys for being here. Really appreciate it.
Indeed.
Take care. Awesome, man.
It was really a pleasure.
Hey, thank you so much.
And we're